Okay.
Right. Well, welcome everybody to Radical Joy for Hard Times Conversation Cafe, or Earth Exchange Café. And we're absolutely delighted to be here with Larry Hobbs. And we're going to be talking in conversation with him for the next hour. But first, I'm going to welcome everybody in with the solstice energy, be you in the Northern Hemisphere, to welcome in that bright, fiery summer solstice energy. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, to welcome in the dark earth energy of the winter, the darkness that holds you in that crucible of rest and community. So first of all, we turn to the east in our cafe. We've walked into our virtual cafe, and we've now talked to so many people. We've got pictures on the walls, we've got batiks, we've got music playing, we've got books lining all of the bookcases, and we are surrounded by the memory, that intangible memory of all those people we've already been blessed to be in conversation with. And we walk in, and we first of all just stand with our faces to the east and welcome the energy of the rising sun. We welcome the hawk, who spirals up into the air and looks down on us with that energy of impartiality and intuition, who knows the ways of the morning. Welcome to our circle. We then turn to the south, into the fiery midsummer sun, feeling the heat of the creativity of midsummer, and the great stag is there, bellowing his rights to belong in the meadows, in the forests. And we welcome his energy of creativity and power. And we turn then to the west, into the setting sun over the great waters of the ocean, and we see the salmon of wisdom swimming from its river, or maybe up to its river, holding a great ancestral wisdom as it swims, and it blesses our circle. And then again to the north, we welcome the great bear, and she's in her den, ready to sleep the winter through. And we also notice that the great bear is in the starry firmaments above us, shining, reminding us that we are connected to more than just this earth, the great cosmic dance above our heads. And finally, we turn into the cafe and feel our friends, our colleagues all around us, ready in our virtual cafe with their hot drinks, cups of tea or water, ready to listen in to this wonderful conversation between Trebi and Larry. And I now pass it over to Trebi to welcome you.
Thank you, Harriet, for that beautiful introduction. Yes, I have known Larry since 2004. We met at a conference of Wilderness Guides Council in Germany. And it is wonderful to welcome him today because he has a fascinating life, and he also has a really beautiful and inspiring attitude and approach to life. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation about many things. I'm going to read his biography because it's so dense and complex. Larry has worked in marine mammal research and natural history education for more than 45 years. He is at home on land and at sea. He has studied stellar sea lions, manatees, polar bears, Irrawaddy dolphins, and gray and bowhead whales. And he also has served as the director of an interdepartmental office in Washington, D.C., where he studied the populations of marine mammals. For 20 years, he taught field courses in general science, geology, and marine biology at Antioch University. He has created a program to take young 4-H members on wilderness rites of passage programs, and he even takes them to, or used to take them to, clearcuts. He has begun leading a wilderness program for military veterans. And he has written several articles for scientific journals. And in fact, just recently has co-written a paper in which he proposes a whole new paradigm for scientists to think about sustainability. And he just got married a few months ago. So as we will discuss in this program, Larry really does live as passionately and generously and forcefully, vigorously with death as he does with life. So Larry, I'd read a few of those amazing things that you have done, which really just truly cover just a tiny bit of the surface of what's led you around the world in so many places for so many years. So what do you think has been the main thread that's led you on this amazing journey in your life? Or has there been more than one thread, one sort of question or impulse that's drawn you?
Oh boy! Oh, thank you for the introduction. I listened. Who is this guy? Because it is, that William Stafford poem about following the thread. We just can't let go of the thread, no matter what happens. We get off on little tangents. I do, but basically following the thread. I only ever just wanted to eke out a living as camping, being out. And that was kind of the underpinning of all this, and allowed the opportunities to arise. And I think the trick for me was to take them, no matter having no idea where they're leading, but this is what's in front of me. And so that's what I'll do. So, in terms of a real shift though, when I was in my early 20s, I was studying dolphins in Hawaii, spinner dolphins, and Gregory Bateson, who some of you may have heard of, I think certainly one of the greatest minds of the last century, because he was studying systems and really looking into what a new paradigm might look like, because there's a lot of talk about it, but not much just factual. How do we do this thing? And Gregory allowed me to sit at his feet. Literally, I sat at his feet when the most famous thinkers of the world at that time in the 60s would come by, and he'd talk to them. And usually he was pretty rough on them because they were speaking from an old paradigm. How can we move forward to the cutting edge of a paradigm that we already know doesn't work? And so Gregory was rough on these people. He really called them on their way of thinking, their epistemology. So that to me, he shifted from just growing up in a regular material family and workplaces, and that really didn't satisfy my curiosity. And Gregory pointed, no, we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about a new way of thinking, not solving the problems within the same container that created them, but creating a new container. And that was really and everything since then has been aimed that way.
So could you just say in a few, briefly, like what was that paradigm that swept you up of his?
I can't say anything briefly, and you know that. We'll try. The story is always there. From this linear, I want at A to get to B. And so I take the shortest distance between 2 points as a straight line. So we'll go, and that's the way we function in this material, mechanistic, everything's like a 1956 Chevrolet. You turn on the key and, you'll slip a few switches and it'll all be fine. But within a systemic world, going from A to B includes thousands of interactions, absolutely thousands of interactions. In this new paper that we're just having published soon, we talk about the complexity of interactions in an ecosystem. And usually people write about 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or something. And it turns out that when you study just the interactions in a county with their relationship with water, one county in the US, relationship with water, there are more interconnections than there are elementary particles in the known universe.
Oh my God.
That's how many interactions there are. And we go from A to B, and there are C, D, E, F, G, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of interactions, both interpersonally, but also at the collective level. So that's what we're just beginning to understand, that we not only don't know those interactions, we can't know them. And so it makes a whole new world, completely different world from what we're used to in this culture, and we continue to do. And scientists are no different from any other system. Systems have a center pole that they then gather around the center pole, and they'll do anything to keep that center pole there. And we have to throw the center pole out and put a new one in.
Wow.
I see no, and that's what Gregory taught me. I spent 7 years there with him, and it took that long to get through this thick head.
Well, thank you for describing that. That's an extraordinary statistic. Yeah.
It is. It's
But-
10 to the 970th power or something. It's
That's
just
amazing.
extraordinary.
Well, so I'm curious about what you were like as a kid. You said all you wanted to do was go camping. Did you go camping as a boy? What was your first kind of initiation into the natural world?
My father was a forester when I was born for the U.S. Forest Service, and he was a scaler. He'd go through a timber set and tell them how many board feet of lumber that you're going to get before the sale. So I spent time in the woods with him from a very young age, and yeah, I think that was it. And also, at home was not a particularly creative or pleasant place to be, but boy, we'd get out in the woods and all that stuff disappeared. And I think it was an innate yearning for the complexity. It's like going into the greatest cathedral ever made, but the complexity was accurately represented, which it wasn't in my home. We were, everybody was doing the thing. I got enough food and water and, those things, but not nurtured in that holistic way. So that's what I always got from being in nature. And I was lucky enough, again, to when the opportunities arose, follow that thread. If they don't arise, you can give it a little nudge and do something that will create an atmosphere where that new thing can happen. I lost your voice.
Yeah. Open your eyes a little wider and put your antenna out a little further, and then then some of the opportunities that may not be noticeable at first come.
Absolutely.
rushing in.
Absolutely. And it takes great courage. It actually does to follow that, because it's a death rebirth. You're dying to that old way, being rebirthed into this new thing. And that's never easy. It isn't. You know that, Trebby, from your latest move. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Well, so Larry, when you and I met, as I said, it was at an International Wilderness Guides Council gathering in Germany. And we talked, and I remember it very, very well. And I had led the year or two before a vigil in a clear-cut forest in British Columbia. And you had been leading, somebody had told me this, which is why I wanted to meet you, that you had been leading trips for 4-H kids in clear cuts. And tell us about that, like what motivated you to take kids to clear cuts? Because it seems like if you're wanting to get young people to appreciate and be more comfortable in the natural world, you would pick some place where there was a healthy forest rather than a damaged forest. So what was that like? What gave you the idea, and what would happen there?
Oh, good question. It actually started out with a university class that I was teaching, and then the kids too, because what I wanted them to do is to see that there's more to life. It's a different way of thinking. We get caught in this deal of what's right and what's wrong. And I loved your thing of visualization. You get out here on the edges, the periphery of what is known into that which is unknown. And so taking them out, it was a dive into wholeness. It was a dive into what's it really like. You've read about, all these people they've read about it and they know about it. Clear cuts are awful and horrible, and everybody knows that, and it destroys the streams and it destroys this. But the question was, have you ever been in one? What's it really like? And so I'd give them a half hour, spread them out through a clear cut, and just open your heart, open your mind, open all your senses to what's actually there. And they'd come back and we'd do a circle and check in with everybody. And they'd come back with the most remarkable thing. It just blew their minds that, wow, because of this clear cut, I can actually see a whole mountain range over there that I wouldn't have seen before. I can smell a whole different smell than I do in the forest. I can, it brings up the shadow in me. It brings up the anger that I've got. This was started in the early 80s, where at Antioch University, there was a lot of pretty radical feminists, and I had a number of them in the class, and they would say, this is male aggression. This is male, violence was the word. This is male violence. Look at this, cut everything down and clear it. And for some reason inside of me, this yearning for wholeness in myself, but also in our collective, I came up with, that's great, absolutely. So let's explore what feminine violence is. Let's see what that is. Let's spend the rest of this semester together, and that'll be a topic underneath this. What is feminine violence in the natural world? And it was, what an inquiry. I mean, it was great. And it both honored the wholeness of everyone there, but in particular, these women that were so angry, and rightfully so. I mean, good grief. Look what's happened in the, it was not treated well, to say the least. So they were kind of, okay, I'm in. And then they contributed so much, as well as everyone else in the classes or those groups, about the wholeness of our experience. That's just the way it is. We are whole, and there's feminine violence, what we came up with, and I don't know that I'm sure there's people who know a lot more about it, but just experientially what we came up with was that the male violence is what you can see and the female violence is what you can't see. It comes from a deeper place. It's down in the belly. It's not up here in the head, and it will arise if we bring it into the light a little ways, because it's very dark and deep stuff. And how can we honor that which is not spoken and that which is not visible? So it was a beautiful wholeness thing, because here we have the masculine and feminine, and it was such a wonderful inquiry.
Yeah, and how wonderful that you decided to go with that statement, instead of just saying, yeah, okay, there's feminine violence, and maybe you should go off and explore that, but to just say, all right, let's really look at this. That was quite, I'm sure that stayed with all of them. Yeah. I periodically hear back, it's been however long that's been, but yeah, that was a very important thing at that time in particular. And you managed to get the 4-H of Washington State to agree to take kids into the wilderness and fast. How did that come about? Well, it came out of a simple thing, just a night walk, a 2-hour night walk, when I was assisting Stephen and Meredith while he was dying. Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who started Wilderness Rites of Passage. Right. And it was just, the message was that you need to take this to the children in the mainstream. And it was like, again, it's following that thread. I had no idea. So I get a call a few days later from a woman that we had a educational consulting group in Seattle, and we go around and work with the mainstream. We had a workshop for all the vice principals of Puget Sound Basin. We met in individual schools and all that, and she called up and she said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, God, I've got this question. How am I going to bring this into the mainstream? And she said, oh, well, I've retired and I'm now the 4-H agent for King County, the county that Seattle's in. And we'll do it under that. I said, well, thank you. The angels, they never catch you right at the top of the cliff when you're about to jump over. They always wait till you drop down and you're about an inch off the bottom to crash land, and they pick you up. So she was an angel, another angel. And she said, well, you'll need to write up a business plan. I said, count me out.
I don't know how to do that. She, oh, great, I'll do it. And in 10 minutes, she done it. I'd actually tried to work on it for days. So there was this angel, and she said, we can do this within 4-H. They have a challenge program. It'll work great. And it took me 2 years to convince the risk management people at Washington State University, which 4-H comes out of. Took me 2 years to convince them that this is safe. And in 20 years, we never even had a scratch. And the people who are riding horses are in the hospital all the time, but it was so foreign to them. They just couldn't believe that their first question, you want to take our children out and fast alone in the wilderness for 3 days and nights? That's crazy. That can't happen. Fasting alone? So just whittled away at it, just chipped away at it. And finally they said, let's give it a try. Bless their hearts. They really went out on a limb for us. And we just started it up slowly. And we've, served hundreds of kids. And it's been in a little bit of a lull because 4-H wouldn't run anything during COVID. But we're starting again this summer. So.
And just to clarify, for those who don't know, 4-H is a national program for young people, and I think it's primarily agricultural, right? Like the H stands for heart, hands, health, and head, or something like that.
Right.
You want to say a little bit more about what 4-H is?
Yeah, there's 6 million kids in the United States and 2 million in Canada that are part of this. It was started as the corn clubs in the early part of the 20th century. And what they did was that they had made hybrid corn that grew so much faster and better than the corn that mom and dad had been planting out there in the fields. And so they tried to introduce it to the parents, and nothing. They just said, we've been growing this corn. So they had this brainstorm that we'll start these things called corn clubs, and we'll give these hybrid corn to the kids. They'll go plant it, and the parents will see they're getting 2 times as much as we're getting. So let's do that. So it was a manipulation of the system, which we're still paying the price for. I mean, that hybrid corn is hybrid corn, and there's a lot that goes with that. So the money flows from the agriculture department down to a university in every state that is then disperses that money to every county has a 4-H program in the United States and in Canada, in the province they have it. So we've got access to that. And I thought we'd go to the clubs, but they are just focused on cows and horses and sowing and whatever they're doing for the county fairs. And so I found that we had to find little niches within it. And the challenge program, all the ropes courses in Washington State are run by this challenge program, and they have rowing stuff, all kinds of things. So we were able to sneak in, but it took a couple of years of hard work, really focused work.
But it happened, which is amazing.
Follow the thread. That's all I can say.
So you've led these wilderness rites of passage programs for many years, all different kinds. I mean, for men, for kids. And 5 years ago, you started guiding yet another different kind of one for military veterans. How did that come about, and why did that feel right for you?
Boy, that was just another one. Miracles and just people, angels show up. I was co-leading a month-long training in Colorado, and one of the participants was a hardened veteran. He'd been 10 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, kicking down doors, shooting people. Obviously, PTSD was a big part of his life. He grew up in a tough neighborhood, tough parents, tough environment, and then he went into the Army to get the hell out of that, and just got into it deeper. And at the end of this month-long training, he said, I've got this passion for taking this to veterans, and I want you to co-lead it with me. And I said, well, look, I'm not a veteran. I actually went, in Vietnam era, I left the country because I had a great moral difficulty with what that war was standing for. And he said, well, I know you well enough to know anybody who can put radio transmitters on polar bears and bowhead whales, you're a veteran and live life the way you've lived it. So I said, okay, let's give it a shot. And so we had no funding, no anything, and some differences, some real differences, because as a veteran, I had to learn a lot about what the needs are and how to approach that. So we got the first one, just scraped by. We had 12 people out on the land and experimenting, trying what works for these people with these extraordinary stories. I mean, every single story, the women, we at first we thought we'd do all men, you know, it's kind of classic, oh yeah, this is a guy thing. And luckily, again, we listened to the soft voice inside of the head that said, no, this has to be men and women. We have to have this balanced. And it's turned out that we've had equal numbers of women, we've had equal numbers of people of all colors and racial backgrounds, LGBTQ people. It's an amazing group of people, and they have this common bond. If you've never read the book called Tribe, it's really describes it beautifully. This common bond that they have in their training and also in their experience in the field. I've heard the word "I've got your back." You know, people say that. I had no idea what that really meant. These people have each other's backs. These guys would come out. I'm now in a whole nother phase of my life with cancer. It doesn't matter. I give them a call, they'd be there in a second. Wouldn't even think about it. So they had that bond. And so when we brought them back into that tribal bond, they were just, we're in. And I thought, okay, we're going to have these circles in the beginning and we're going to kind of grind into what's really going on with each person. And I thought, oh God, we're going to have to pull teeth here. We're going to have to, you know, really. And man, these people have all had a gun to their head, in their mouth. They call it swallowing iron. My co-guide, Mark, had 22 of the men that he served with had already killed themselves in out of service. And there's a veteran every 22 minutes kills himself not in service. This is post-service. And the VA is, you know, they're overbooked, underpaid, all that, all these systems that we have are pretty broken. Not just the VA, but pretty broken. And so they're just shoving meds down these people. And, you know, medications are a tough thing. We don't even know what one really does. But when you add a cocktail of 10 or 15 of these medications, you have absolutely no idea what's going on, with the number of elements in that system probably being the same as the number of primary particles in the universe. So we're giving them a simpler answer, taking them to the land, letting the land heal. That's the big deal. Go tell them, go out on the land, dig a hole and shout that shit into it. Scream it out to the heavens in the middle of the night. Whatever it takes, that stuff's got to get out of you. Mm-hmm. And going to the land, from my perspective, is it's the most whole kind of healing that we can have. And the second year, Frederick Marx, who's a great documentarian and also a great humanitarian, started the Youth Passageways program for group people that are working with youth on the land. And Frederick called me up. He's award-winning documentarian. He said, "Well, I want to make a documentary of your work there out in the land." And so I went, well, okay, this is going to be tough. there's a, you know, because his job is to get the most emotional, up close and personal stuff that he can get that's really gets people's hearts. And my job is to keep the people safe so that they can actually tell their story. And so we went through months of trying to get that straight. And he then invited the guy who was the money behind it, John Crary, beautiful man, to come out. He said, "I want this guy to be out there and see what we're doing." And I said, "Oh my God, you know, money people, I don't think so." You know, I said, "Let's have a Zoom call with," and here's this guy with such a big heart, unbelievable. And he's been giving us money, a lot of money every year now to run this, because with the veterans, so many of them don't have money at all. So we pay for their hotels, for their transportation, for their gear. We take care of them. And it's that I've got your back thing.
Mhm.
And that was a big learning for me, because at the School of Lost Words, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you people all know this stuff. You bring your stuff and we'll just do the circle. You bring your food and your gear. So it was a completely different world that I worked in and still work in with these vets. We have another one coming up in the end of July and one in the end of August. And Trevi, you're going to be out there in July.
Yes, I'm co-guiding that one. Yes.
Oh, it's going to be so beautiful. And yeah, so the veteran thing was again, angels showing up, this guy with the money to do it, and he's supported us every year. He says, how you guys doing? And we've been able, because once you get a little money, then the foundations want to give you more. So we've been pretty good on it, but any shortfall, write out a check. Beautiful, beautiful. All
So
these
Larry,
people show up.
what?
All the people that just show up.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, being in that group of people who have had such intense experiences and are so eager to change, what has leading the veterans' rights programs done for you personally? How has it changed you?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things is what I mentioned, this deal of getting someone's back. What does that really mean to show up for another person, no matter what? So that's been a real big deal. It's, one of the teachings we have is a 4 directions teaching, and that comes from the Mayan history and also American Indian, but also from many other, all prior to all civilizations prior to us have had some kind of teaching around the 4 directions, the 4 seasons.
As Harriet did in the opening, which
Yes,
was her
exactly.
Druid tradition.
Exactly. So realizing that in just a whole new level, the value of those teachings, because they're teachings of wholeness, nothing is left out. And the research that I do is the same thing. Nothing is left out. When you look at the whole system and go from there, rather than Humpty Dumpty's broken and now we want to put it back together again. I don't think so. That's not the way it works. It works from wholeness, from starting from wholeness. This is who you are. And for them to take that out, and in the documentary, we gave them GoPros to the people that were going out, so we didn't have to send camera people, and said, do what you want to with it. And this black man just nailed it. He was out in the 3rd night, and he's tired and hungry. He kept a sheath knife next to his, because he's gonna be safe out here, and he put lines out so if somebody came, they'd trip over him, or an animal or something. He knew what to do to protect himself. And then that 3rd night, he got on his GoPro and he said, I don't know about the language I can use on this, but boy, he called it. You white people, you privileged people. I went and fought for freedom, but I'm not free in my own country. And fuck you, and just on and on. And then when he came out, this almost beatific look on him, and he was laughing and smiling. He had to go back home to Georgia, and he had to serve some time. He had to make it good with the people, and but he did it with an open and clean heart. So something happens out on that land where the land evokes inside of us. That's why every ceremony is different in different parts of the world. I go and do it in California, it's not going to be the same as it is in Washington. It just isn't, because the land evokes the wholeness of who we are, that we're light and shadow. We're always light and shadow. That's not going to go away. We just have to make some cracks sometimes in the darkness to let the light shine through. And that's what the land does. It speaks to us. And so when they come back, they've got a story, and often they'll say, well, nothing happened out there. I go, oh, goody, this is going to be a good one. Nothing happened out there, right? What about that voice that came in the middle of the night? What about that coyote howling in your ear and scared you to death and you went through it? What about? Just these amazing stories that they all have to tell have just been in my heart to sit there, cry with them, laugh with them. Yeah, there's another guy in that documentary, and at some point during the interview for Intention, just said, what happened to your smile? What happened to your smile? And he kind of like, and he came back and he got this big smile on his face, and everybody just went crazy. It's like, yeah, that's the wholeness. We're not stuck in the dark and we're not stuck in the light. We move through that.
Yeah,
And
Larry,
once
is that film available to see? Because I think it's a very, very powerful film. Is there a way for people to see that?
Yes, there are on iTunes. iTunes bought the rights for distribution. So it's I don't know how much money or whatever, but it's on iTunes, or I can give a link.
Okay, and what's the name of the film?
Leaving It on the Land.
Leaving It on the Land, right?
Veterans Coming Home.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Harriet's going to write it down. Yeah, Leaving It on the Land. It's a wonderful film. And there is a scene in there where the man that Larry was just talking about, after he's told his story, and he goes over and gives Larry a hug, and this smile comes on his face, and it is so innocent and beatific and gorgeous. It's a really powerful moment.
Yeah,
So
and
Larry,
he's come back and he's assisted us, I mean,
right.
he's coming back to help us out. Beautiful man.
So I want to switch to Radical Joy for Hard Times a little bit. You, since the very beginning, you have done our Global Earth Exchange, which is coming up this Saturday, June 25th, our 13th one, believe it or not. And you have done them up in Washington, in your home state, for clear cuts. You've done them in Alaska. Including on some of these eco tours that you have led, where people spend a lot of money to go to Antarctica and Alaska and learn about the wildlife there. And you have managed to sneak this ceremony in to your lectures about the world. And so I'm curious how you have done that and how it's been received.
You learn as a naturalist early on that if you say anything with enough surety and stuff, they're going to believe it. So I just spoke to them about, that we have destroyed so much of the planet that, I'm going up the Inside Passage on a small expedition ship and up through British Columbia, up into Southeast Alaska, and you're looking along there and there's clear cuts everywhere. Vancouver Island has been essentially denuded. There's one valley that's been uncut on the east side and one on the west side. Otherwise, it's all been cut. And so just talking to these people, this is what we've done. We've done a lot of this harm. How can we go back to those places and really take it in? That's going into the shadow. Jung would talk about that's going down into that place. How can we sit with that with equanimity? How can we hold that as an equal ground? This is what we've done. So what are we going to do about that? How can we find, the beauty in it? But you got to go into it. You really have to walk into it, And the first time at that first one, I live in a defunct little coal mining town up in the Cascades. And so there's all these piles of tailings. So we went to the top of one of these big piles and then made out of some of the coal bits, we made the bird of the Radical Joy and took a picture of it and had some people from the community show up. But on the eco tours, just, because these people have paid a lot of money and they're, wanting to see wildlife and all that, just that sometime during the day, you're going to see something that's a little upsetting to you. Sit with that. Sit with that as you walk through a forest and all of a sudden you come to a clear cut. Or if you look at, or even just hearing about the state of our oceans, which is horrendous. I mean, people have no idea that there's not a fishery in the world that is actually healthy. And they're either on crashing or on the verge of crash. So we're facing those kind of things. And how can we bring bring joy and wholeness into, yeah, that's our experience. How do we want to go forward from here? So I just throw that out to them and let them do what they wanted with it. Maybe make a little offering, take off a little flower or something, with permission, of course, from the flower, and put it out in the middle of a clear cut, just rather than just getting lost in it. How can we honor it and move forward?
Oh, that's great. It's so simple and it's so right for that particular audience. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I have a bunch of other questions for you. However, I do want to turn to the fact of this particular phase in your own life, and see if we can talk about that for a little bit. And if maybe there's time for some other things as well about your amazing life. But I mean, one of the things is, so you got a pretty bad medical diagnosis a year and a half ago. And I think that anybody who is watching you now, as you answer these questions and talk about your life, will see that you are not, you are a vigorous, life affirming, alive person. So how do you do it? I mean, tell us what's going on, if you would, and how are you so alive in this time of dying?
Beautiful question. And of course, I've been contemplating that question for a year and a half. Yeah, they told me I had to go in for an emergency surgery because my kidneys were shutting down and everything was going bad. And so, but they originally thought that it was something else altogether. They thought it was Crohn's disease, and they just take out a little chunk of my, large intestine, and we'd be good. They got in there, and this is cancer everywhere. So they took out the kidney, the ascending colon, ureter. So I'm left with one kidney. And so the surgeon came in the next morning. It ended up being a very long surgery rather than the 2-hour one they were going to do. And she said, well, I've got some news for you here. This was nothing to do with what we thought it was. They took out the appendix where it all started. And so living with that, and then they said, you'll be dead 8 to 12 months if you don't get chemo. And I talked to the chemo people and I went, man, if I'm going to live that long, I want to live it. I don't want to be half dead all the way through and then die. I want to live whatever I've got. So I made that choice. It was a staggering choice for about 2 weeks of hell, just going through it, trying to make the decision kind of in a rational way. But the data was so unclear. They don't know. This is a very unusual cancer, type of cancer, and place it came from. So I wrestled with it, and all of a sudden there was this, here's the gift. All of a sudden there was this moment of absolute clarity. I can't explain where it came from, but it was a very clear no. Absolutely. Doesn't matter what the data is, doesn't matter what the docs say now. There's a knowing deep inside of me somewhere that says, nope, this is not the right thing for you. So I was able to keep going. 8 months came along, doing good. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And I had to go back into another emergency surgery on, this was Christmas Eve day. And I went in there, they said, well, the COVID's so bad, we can't transfer you from our little country hospital into a hospital where they do this. But you can come down and just sit in the ER. And we've got to do, if there's something wrong, we got to do something with you. So I spent 8 hours in the ER at University of Washington Hospital. It was a very good hospital. And they got me a bed finally. And then they said, ooh, this is really bad. Your colon is about to burst. It's cut off completely. And I knew the pain was horrendous. And they said, we're going to get you into surgery immediately. Well, it turns out the supply chain for materials for surgery had run out. They didn't have the supplies. They couldn't do it. And people are still saying, oh, COVID's nothing. Well, so they were taking x-rays every 8 hours so that they could make sure that the colon wasn't going to burst and then you're dead anyway. But that was a little over 12 months after I was supposed to be dead. And they did that surgery or I would have died. And so they cut me open stem to stern again and cleaned everything out, and put in an ostomy bag. And it's sort of like I knew I was going to be a bag man at some time in my life, but I didn't think of this particular kind of bag. So that was it's a big deal. I never would have thought that at all, ever, ever, ever. And so that's been a wonderful lesson. And the lesson in it, Trevi, that you're, all along has been, okay, I'm living today. How can I live this day in the best way possible? How can I learn that everything outside my hula hoop is out of my control? I have absolutely no control over that. But I do have some control inside the hula hoop. There's sometimes not that much control in there too. But I do have this ability, and we all have it, to go, okay, that world out there is going to do what it does. And the veterans have taught me this too. It's just going to do what it does. The only question for me is, how am I going to be in relationship to that? How do I want to relate? And you can be a grumpy old fart and sit around and complain and whine about stuff, or walk out the door and see what's happening. Spend time in kind of quiet time. Where's the thread today? Where is this thread? What opportunities are going to present themselves outside my hula hoop that I need to make decisions about relationships? So in the new paradigm, it's all about relationship. It's not about getting what we want or avoiding what we don't want. It's about, how am I in relationship to this? And that takes a much deeper look inside, because I want to fight, you did this wrong, and I then pointing fingers and all that. That's the problem. That's not the solution. The solution is always looking deeper inside. Okay, my little kids, my inner children have to be taken care of, that didn't get taken care of when they were little. And I can do that in here. And then I'm prepared to go out into the world and not be an asshole. Well, most of the time. You never know. So that the lesson mostly for me, Trevi, has been really taking on, we all know we only have today to live, but we don't really live it that way, until something like this comes along, and it forces me to go, okay, what is mine to do today? What is mine to do? And then leave alone and just watch the day unfold as it does, and things will happen over which I have no control. But I do have control over my relationship with it.
Well,
So-
and the way you're doing it is really inspiring and wonderful. Yeah. So Larry, I want to conclude. I mean, we're going to see if Harriet and anyone who might be listening has questions, but I want to read you something. In this preparation for this conversation, I did just a little online research about you, and I found something I want to read to you that I think might surprise you. And it's something that you wrote in, I believe, 2014, in preparation for the 50th reunion of your high school, Alhambra High School in Alhambra, California. And this is what you wrote. I think they asked about what your visions for your future are. And you wrote this: I sometimes feel like Ulysses, when later in his life, he put a set of oars over his shoulder and walked inland until someone asked him what those funny shaped sticks were over his shoulder. He then set down roots after a life of adventure at sea. And you conclude, I would like to set down roots with someone compatible before I kick the bucket. And you have. I mean, you got married just a few weeks ago.
Oh, it's Trevi. Boy, is that a dip into the past. Oh my God. Yeah, I was trying to set down, I'm not very good at setting down my oars, but getting better. But yeah, another angel came along. We'd been having coffee together for 2.5 years. Susan decided she was going to move to Hawaii, and again, angels. I sat down, we were having a cup of coffee, and I said, Susan, I've just really been attracted to you. You know, I was kind of nervous, and she just got so cute. She just said, well, I've been to you too. You know, such a sweet moment. And then I said to her, you know, I'm not interested in relationships that are just dealing with the surface. I'm too old, too much. I just not interested at all. I want to know if you want to explore intimacy with me. And she got quiet. And then all of a sudden I looked over and her arms were crossed and her legs were crossed. And she said, look at me, I'm all crossed up. And I went, that's a woman for me, that she realizes that she's all crossed up. And she said, yes, I really want to do that. And so we were to get married in the Antarctic, where I worked for 37 years. But because of the surgery, we couldn't do that. So yeah, it was the end of January, we decided we'd just elope. Old farts elope in Upper County, Kittitas County. And so we went to just to the justice of the peace and did this beautiful little 5-minute thing. And then we went home and washed dishes and went out. You know, but it was an affirmation of what was already just totally true. And so yeah, and the gift of that and exploring intimacy, you think about, oh, just the emotions and all that. Boy, if we had the body part too, getting, you know, really discovering intimacy of that commitment that no matter what, it's a commitment to wholeness, no matter what, it's all going to come up. And can I help create a container big enough to hold all that stuff where there's no escape? And that's what we strive for daily. And we check in every other day and no holds barred. We just let each other know where we are, which is a beautiful, beautiful and difficult practice.
Yeah. And you know, how many people get to state their vision for their 50th high school anniversary and then have it be realized? That's just really extraordinary.
Oh, Trevi, that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, share it with Susan. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're almost out of time, but I wonder, Harriet, if you have any questions or if anybody who is listening on Facebook has any questions.
Oh, it's beautiful listening to you. There are no questions as yet on Facebook, but as Chubby said, often people look afterwards and it goes on YouTube. So there's plenty of time afterwards. And if you are on Facebook or want to look on YouTube, you may want to comment, you know, and respond to comments and things yourself. So that could be something to do. But I'm really just very, very taken with what you're saying. And I love the commitment to wholeness about marriage and thinking, yes, note to self, that's exactly how I should put that to my husband. You've committed to wholeness. So yeah, that's what I'm giving you. And just what a wonderful immersive thing that is. That's just beautiful. There's so much, and it's just beautiful to hear you and to be witnessing your laughter and your joy. Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks, Harriet.
Thanks.
Well, I have more questions, but this just feels like a good way to end, you know, with that vision of how you want to live your future, Larry, and how you are, and the fact that you have and bring so much joy to life at this stage of your life, when it would be so easy for so many people to do it in a different way. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing you on the Veterans Fest in just a few weeks. So.
Oh, thank you, Trevi. Yeah, I get nervous about these things and I won't have anything to say. And thank you. It's been just fun. It's been a joy to be with both of you. Thank you so much for providing this. It's beautiful.
Well, you're most welcome. And just as I close the cafe doors, just to say that we really are. We're not together, but there is a big community to hold you in these conversations. So it may be that the inspiration has been actually coming through in some way. So, you know, you've been really held and you're giving out as well in such a reciprocity with this community. So thank you so much for your honesty and showing up, really showing up and sharing yourself with us in this cafe.
Yeah. Thank you.
So with that, I'll unwind the circle and thank the bear of the north for holding us in the quiet of the evening and the darkness in the winter. And the rest, the water and the salmon of wisdom, as they too have given us the messages of our ancestors and those people whose wisdom we have carried through in our own way, in our own lives. And the fire that keeps burning throughout life, that keeps creating and transmuting and giving us an energy right from the start to the very end. Thank you for holding us and giving us the creativity to find the words. And to the hawk, who've bared witness to the energy of the air as it's given us the inspiration to talk and to imagine. And we finally now exit the cafe together with our other fellow cafe goers, and give such thanks to Larry for being with us in conversation today, and to Trebi for hosting and holding such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Harriet, and thank you, Larry.
Mm.